Welcome back to the Scarlet Faithful podcast, and it's my pleasure to welcome in old friend Brian Fonseca, current beat reporter for Rutgers Athletics with NJ Advanced Media. Brian, great to have you here. Thanks so much for being back.
It's always a pleasure to talk some Rutgers sports with you, Aaron. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, and you're doing a great job on the beat this year with football. Just wanted to ask you first, 3-2, 5 games in, pretty much where everyone I think would have signed up for or had hoped Rutgers would be at this point. Obviously, covering the beat and seeing fan reactions, it's been a little bit of a roller coaster so far. What is your assessment of this team, where they're at, and kind of versus where your expectations were where they'd be at this point?
I agree with you in that if fans were told, the week before Boston College that 5 games in, they'd be 3-2, they would have beaten Boston College, they would have beaten Temple, I think people would have been happy. They would have signed for that in blood. I think some of the ways they got there, the struggles against Temple, the way they lost to Iowa, I think people probably thought that was more winnable game than it really was. But the way they lost to that really caused some anxiousness. And then being tired of losing to Ohio State like a blowout every year. I think everyone kind of expected that, but fans are what they are, and they always expect things to get a little bit better. I think the record-wise, they are as good as they could have possibly hoped to be. I think 4-1 would have been the absolute peak of possibility. I think 3-2, everyone would be happy with that. But the thing with this year is that it was always seen as a developmental year, the so-called year before the year. I think everyone kind of went into it with that expectation. And with that comes the hope that along with the record, you see gradual improvement along key positions at quarterback, the offensive line, things of that nature. You see that in the defensive line. I think that's fair to say that that unit has been the most impressive. The linebackers have been good, though the depth behind them has not been great. But you really don't see that at quarterback. A lot of that is because of injury, obviously, and we can get into that later. But the quarterback position is the position that people probably are more worried about because they haven't seen that growth that they were hoping for. And the offensive line has been better than last year. But again, that was to be expected. They haven't been maybe as much of an improvement as people hoped. So I think as far as what they see on the field, people are a bit antsy that they haven't improved as much as they hoped. Record-wise, I really don't think anybody has any complaints, reasonable at least, about where they are.
I agree with you, and I always laugh with it. Seems like every year now, the reaction after the loss to Ohio State gets more dramatic. And I've said multiple times, I think that game, the margin of defeat in that game, it's irrelevant. It really doesn't matter. No matter how much they lose to Ohio State, it has nothing to do with the outcome of the season, how this season is going to be ultimately judged, and goals and all that. I guess my next question is, because I in terms of where this team is health-wise, obviously Schiano is even more tight-lipped than ever this year with injuries, and three key secondary players out last week. Obviously, we know quarterback situation's been a concern. There's been other players. Kanopka's out now. Aaron Young hasn't played all year. What is I guess how concerned are you in terms of the injuries starting to pile up, especially now going into this short week against Nebraska?
I do think that they lucked out on last weekend was probably the most injured they've been as a whole. They lucked out in that it's against Ohio State that even if they were at full strength, frankly, they weren't going to win that game, right? So I think if you're going to have guys miss a week or two, it's going to be in that period where the games are not as quote unquote winnable. I think the concern would be very big if they don't get a decent amount of those guys back for Nebraska and Indiana, which are essentially the season. Those two games will determine how the season ends up. So I'm again, like you said, Schiano is very tight-lipped. He's not going to give any details about injury. We talked to Noah Vedral today, and he was as tight-lipped as Schiano, really learning from him in a lot of ways, but especially the coaching secrecy there. So we don't know. I think we'll find out on game day. But the sooner they can get healthy, the better, because this is a team that is not deep enough to be able to withstand these injuries, especially against a pretty strong Big Ten schedule.
And in talking to Vedral, and what did you think about Vedral playing? For me, it was kind of, I know you were at the game, but on the broadcast, they knew ahead of time. They talked about how he wasn't going to be able to throw, and he was only going to be able to be in there to run the ball. It just seems to me, obviously you're telegraphing now to opponents what you're doing when he's in there, but B, I don't know. For a veteran guy like that, I think it's strange to have to work him back in that way when he's not full strength. What are your thoughts on the situation?
I agree. I frankly don't see the value of putting him out there and risking his health further. Especially like you said, he wasn't going to throw the ball. I think Ohio State, if they didn't know that before the game, it was obvious after the 2 snaps he took where he didn't even threaten to throw the ball. And when you put the guy in danger, when they know what's coming, and you have a ferocious Ohio State defense that can get to the backfield and tackled him. I asked him about when he walked off the field after his 4th snap, he tapped his helmet. People were speculating that was him saying he needs to come out. He re-aggravated his injury. The truth, yeah, he didn't play after that, but what he told us was that it was about something else, and he's all right. I'll take him at his word for that, But yeah, I didn't particularly understand the philosophy there. I guess one thing I could think of is maybe the guy's been, recovering for a month and a half. It's his last season. He must be getting antsy at some point to get back out there. And as much as he buys into the plan and the process and everything with recovering, you reward a guy by letting him get back on the field and getting a taste of what that's like because I can imagine and this is just me talking. This is me not reporting anything or anything, but I can imagine a guy just dealing through the drolls of recovery, getting that little bit of taste of the field again, kind of gives you that little extra juice to push forward. So I would say that him talking to us today is probably a good sign that he'll at the very least be a 50-50 shot to play. My guess is he does play, because if he was good enough to play against Ohio State, he'll play against Nebraska. But again, we'll see on Friday, because you never really know with these things until game day.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, Noah's been stand up for this program and been, as much as he's been criticized at times by fans. I mean, where would Rutgers be without him the last, 2 previous seasons? And also, you have to feel for him. 2 years ago, he missed the Nebraska game, his old school, where he's from, his family, so many former players in his family at Nebraska. He was there originally with Scott Frost. So, I'm sure they're doing it. That's how I thought of it, was maybe they played him a little bit against Ohio State, really hoping he could play against Nebraska in some way to give him a chance to do it. What are your thoughts in terms of Nebraska coming in? They beat Indiana. Obviously, they've had a tumultuous year so far. I mean, how much have you kind of looked at them or read up on them in terms of how you look at this matchup going into Friday?
From what I can gather, I haven't delved too deep into all the stats and analytics yet, but I think it's going to end up being a shootout if Rutgers is going to beat this team. Nebraska's defense is dreadful. I mean, dreadful. They got just demolished by Georgia Southern, and they shut out Indiana in the second half, but they gave up 3 touchdowns in the first half against Indiana, which, I mean, from what I understand, not exactly the most high-powered offense in the country. So now that's true also of Rutgers, right? So this will be a challenge for the Rutgers offense to show whether they struggled a lot in the last 2 weeks because they played 2 elite defenses in Iowa and Ohio State, or if they're truly, as bad as the statistics make them look. If they struggle against Nebraska's defense, that is like panic button city, like smashing that. This is it's a horrible sign. I don't know if this Rutgers offense is built to win a shootout. I think they're going to have to. I do think the Rutgers defense will, maybe limit them more than Indiana did, for example. But I do think that if Rutgers is going to win this game, they're going to have to score, their season high against FBS opponents is 22 against Boston College. They're going to have to score more than that, probably hit the 30s. I predicted maybe exaggerated 38-31. I don't know if it'll get to that point, but I do think it'll have to be that sort of game for Rutgers to win, just because, and if they don't score 30 points against this Nebraska defense, again, I really think there'd be major concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think Nebraska's offense actually is pretty good. And Mark Whipple today, the offensive coordinator, seems pretty fired up. I feel like, they're certainly going to be, ready to play. What are your thoughts on, I looked this up today and I kind of knew going in, but this is actually their first true road game of the year. They played in Dublin in August, and then they had 4 home games and a bye week. I don't know. I kind of look at the flip side. It could almost help them in terms of all the trouble they've been in this year to get out of town finally. Do you think that's any factor in this game, good or bad, for Rutgers?
I think these are always these intangible factors or things you could always kind of spin in however direction you want to look. Like, for example, the road game, it could give them a way, would escape Lincoln and kind of get them away from that situation. But it could also, are they ready to go out east and play in a hostile environment? Because Dublin wasn't exactly hostile. I think that was Lincoln East when they went over there. It was 90% red, right? So, and then the other thing is, they're coming off of firing a head coach. Will that help them? It helped them against Indiana. It seemed like they had some extra pep in their step from that. Or are they coming down from that, early adrenaline from firing Frost? Has the early magic of Mickey Joseph worn off? It's tough to tell. Bill Bush, the new DC, they switched their DCs a couple weeks ago. They had a good game against Indiana. Was that some adrenaline? Was that, coaching adjustments. I don't know. So I never really try to delve too deep into these because you could really spin them either way. I'm sure that all of that will have an effect. I just can't quantify it. So I don't know.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on Sam Brown, running back? I was really hopeful for him coming into the year. I really thought, I was hoping, as much as we talked about running back or quarterback, I was hoping he would emerge as the guy by the end of the season. And I feel like we're kind of already there. How impressed were you with what he did against Ohio State? And how much do you think he's going to be the guy moving forward?
Yeah, I think he has immense potential. I remember seeing him for the first time in training camp, and he's just a huge human being. He's it's hard to think that of all the freshmen that didn't enroll in January, he's one of the ones that came in the summer. He missed out an entire winter conditioning program, and he's still one of the biggest guys, on the team. He's a legit 6'1", 220. He's got visible Big Ten running back size, and he plays like it. You see him hit the hole hard. He runs hard. He gets yards after contact. Yeah, I've been really impressed with what I've seen so far. And I am surprised though at how quickly he's risen up the running back, pecking order. It goes from the third guy without Aaron Young being around to arguably it's him and Monungai. He's gotten more carries than Monungai recently. So it's I don't know if he's like the bona fide number one guy just yet, but he's obviously a key part of the rotation. He's not going to redshirt because he's played in 5 games. So I could see him having a major role by the end of the year, the way that things are progressing.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like they kind of have to ride him this game too, because Nebraska's really bad against the run defense. And I thought I looked back at the splits because it was actually even split, because I was wondering how much I couldn't remember how much he ran for in the second half versus Ohio State, but it was actually an even split. He had 7 carries, 39 yards in the first half against Ohio State, which is it's going against their A-team defense. And then he was 8 for 40 in the second half. So I actually liked how consistent he was in that game too.
Sure, absolutely. And I think similar splits against Iowa. I don't think when he ran against Iowa, it was all the second half. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I have a feeling that it was similar like against Iowa, which is very impressive given how good Iowa is defensively.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I've looked back at series starting with Iowa, like the second quarter on, he was the running back used. It wasn't even like they were rotating in a series. He went multiple series in a row as the guy out there. So I think it's intriguing. I think this may be, knock on wood, but this could be his breakout game, put a stamp on the fact that he is the guy against Nebraska on Friday. What else do you think are keys to this game against Nebraska?
Not turning the ball over. As much as a cliche is that's been around this program under Shiano, I mean, it's really important that this is a team that is not good enough. This offense is not good enough to deal with self-inflicted wounds. That was obvious against Iowa, but even against Nebraska in a game that's probably going to be close, you can't shoot yourself in the foot like they've been doing. And to that vein, penalties have been a huge issue for this team. They can't afford to keep committing these penalties, and especially the kinds of penalties. They've had at least 1 or 2 false starts every game. It feels like these procedural penalties. Shiano seems to be a fan of the aggressive penalties, so-called. He likes to say that he doesn't like to be the least penalized team in the country because it shows you're not being aggressive. He said that a couple times, but these aren't aggressive penalties. These are just, I don't know if it's discipline or sloppiness, however you want to describe it. These are just things that should not be occurring as frequently as they are. So first of all, just cleaning those things up. And I just think Evan Simon, who I'm guessing is the quarterback purely off the fact that he's the only guy we know for a fact is healthy, barring something changing between now and Friday. If he's going to be the guy again for the 4th straight game, he's got to have his best game yet, right? I know he's threw for 300 yards against Iowa, but let's be frank, a lot of that came, I don't want to say garbage time, but it was really after the game was kind of decided. So he's going to have his best game, and the offense just has to be better. And the defense has to play well, obviously, but I think those factors are all fairly important for them to win this game.
Yeah, obviously, I think, Wimsatt is the X factor. We don't know if he's going to play. This would be, I think, a great game for him to come back in, obviously, with his ability to run against Nebraska. And I think, I don't know. It's going to be really interesting. I think quarterback, what is your thoughts on the quarterback situation? Obviously, injuries have kind of made the decision easy, so to speak, with Simon. But me coming into this season, I was like, of anything, like you talking about it being developmental, I feel like if they don't know who the guy is at quarterback by the end of the year, it's a fail. And obviously there's transfer portal. And I think you or Politi asked, Shiano about it, I think last week, about the transfer portal possibility with quarterback. What are your thoughts on the quarterback situation overall and kind of where they need to be, through this season?
I agree with you for the most part. Injuries really have derailed this entire experiment because you would hope that developmental year, you get a decent look at all the guys in different situations, get a true test of how they're developing, give them a chance to develop too, because you can only really develop when you play in games. Um, Wimsatt obviously had his issues when he was playing. Turnovers were an issue. He had an interception every game he played. But he never really had a chance to work through those issues and develop past them with game time because of the injury. So I guess we'll know more at the end of the year, depending on who recovers when, how much time they get. It's just been a tough start to getting a fair, true evaluation that you can get to the end of the year and realize, okay, this is where we're at with these guys. We need to get a guy from the portal, or this is going to be our guy going forward. I don't know. But to the point of getting a guy out of the portal, so they're going to lose Noah Vedral, right? This is his last year, barring some strange medical red shirt year. They might. That's just a possibility I'm floating out there as like that's the only possible way he's coming back, right? So we're assuming he's not coming back. You have Gavin Wimsatt and Evan Simon. You don't know if they're proven. Let's say we get to the end of the year, no one knows if they're proven. Are you going to get a transfer quarterback who is good enough to play to come in while they have two guys who are the quote unquote future? Are you going to be able to recruit a guy to that level in that situation? Are you going to keep the other two guys? It's a very difficult situation in this era of the transfer portal and everybody having so many options. So I think we'll know. I think the Greg answered Polity's question essentially is we'll know more towards the end of the year, or we'll figure something out. Whatever his answer was, I'm kind of in the similar vein of I think it's a little too early. The issues, injury specifically, have really derailed it in the beginning, but we'll know a lot more, in 5 weeks, 6 weeks time.
Right. So going into the bye week, obviously this is a huge momentum game, not only just for to signal progress for the season, but to also keep bowl contention alive. I guess if they end up losing this game, we know how the fans will react, but and obviously it'll depend how. But is there, while it probably knocks them out of bowl contention, again talking about a developmental year, there's still progress that can be made, right? In the second half of the schedule, obviously, Michigan and Penn State at home, how competitive they are against them. Indiana coming off the bye week, who knows? I mean, Minnesota losing to Purdue really surprised me. Michigan State's, not looking great right now. Would it be premature to write things off in terms of a successful season if they lose to Nebraska?
It depends what you think is a successful season. I think different people have different barometers of that. In terms of making a bowl game, I just don't see a path. They would have to run the table in the quote unquote winnable games. They'd have to beat Indiana, Michigan State, and Maryland. Maryland being, I don't know if that's even winnable anymore. They've looked really good. Minnesota, I hear you. I was surprised at that too. They were missing the running back. I don't know how long he'll be out, but the way they were just destroying teams offensively, I don't know if that's a particularly winnable game either. So I just don't think it's realistic to expect this team to rattle off 3 wins in quote unquote must win situations. So if your barometer for success is a bowl game, I think losing on Friday essentially makes it a not successful season. But to our point earlier about development, you get 6 more games in a variety of situations against easy teams in Indiana, against really hard blue blood teams in Penn State, Michigan. A lot of situations to put in a lot of different players and see how they react, how they develop. So you can evaluate them from there on a game by game basis and see if they develop. So if by the end of the year you get to Maryland and you see a lot of growth in key positions, then you could warrant it a successful season if development and that sort of thing is your barometer for success.
All right. So last football question, just in terms of Schiano, in his 3rd year now, talking about, how that year could end up. You get a lot of comments now about, other programs turn things around in 3 years. And, nowadays with the transfer portal, with NIL, how is past 3 years too long to wait? And I guess what's your assessment of his tenure so far? You've covered it, extensively. And just in terms of, I guess, where he needs to be this year and then going into next year in terms of being considered a success.
I think record-wise, you can't argue against it being a success. I think the first year, 2020, was a weird year, obviously, but they did massively overshot expectations coming off the Ash era. I mean, that was the worst Power 5 team in the country by a mile in 2019, right? And then 2021, they got to 5 wins. Again, exceeding expectations. Maybe if they win that Maryland game at the end of the year, it really is a perfect season essentially from what you could expect. But they don't. They make a bowl game in strange circumstances, etc. I think right. And then this year again, like we said, record wise, it's as good as one could expect. I think if you get to the end of the year and you have a good idea of who the quarterback is, if you get to the end of the year and you feel like the offense is heading in the right direction, if you feel like the defense has enough young talent that if they take a jump in 23 can be one of the best defenses in the Big Ten. If you see jumps like that, then I think it's a success. If the offense continues to struggle the way it's been throughout the rest of the year, if you don't have a quarterback, if you don't see any improvements in many key positions, then I think you start to wonder and worry about 23 and the direction of the program. Obviously, as you mentioned, the portal is always there. It can always help. The way they wouldn't fix the offensive line, but they got the offensive line better this year through the portal. They can do that in other positions. But I think for this to continue on the successful track, because I think the program is in the right direction to this point. To continue there, you really have to see some development in key positions and key areas from now through the end of the year.
All right, so let's end it with a little bit of hoops talk. Practice began last week. Media days are all next week, Big Ten and for Rutgers as well. What are your thoughts just in terms of the offseason they had, restructuring the roster? Obviously, Gio and Ron are now gone. It's really kind of it really is a new team just with different parts they have. What are your initial thoughts of the roster going into this season?
I think their top 5 guys are pretty solid right now as far as like who's starting. I think the only question is the 4 spot, right? I have a feeling that it'll be Mag. I think he has the most potential at that spot. When he wasn't, banged up last year, I think he showed a lot of great signs, and I think that he can be the next, guy that Pikiell takes from an unheralded recruit into, a legitimate Big Ten starter. I'm really excited to see him play. I think Cliff could be one of the best, if not the best, big men in the Big Ten. Which, when you have a guy like that, like Michigan has Hunter Dickinson, as bad as or as young as they are around him, you always know what you're going to get from him. So that raises the floor of a team exponentially. And I will reserve complete judgment until I see them. But I think Cliff, if he takes the jump that he took from his freshman year to his sophomore year, now to his junior year, I think he could be a guy like that who can consistently score, who can be a great defender, who can rebound, control the boards. And when you have a guy like that, your ceiling is decently high. And my question is, scoring wise, are they going to be able to replace Ron Harper? I think Cam Spencer is a great pickup. I think he fits the mold of a Pikiell player. I think he plays hard. I think he is smart. Makes a lot of. You watch his highlight tapes from Loyola. He makes great cuts to the rim. He's always in the right spot, and he overcomes his lack of athleticism with, strong basketball IQ. I hate to say that; it's so cliche, but it's true. And I think he'll be able to shoot at a really good clip. Maybe be the best 3-point shooter Rutgers has had under Pikiell. So, between him and Ron was pretty good, to be fair. But the question that everyone asks that I still don't know the answer to: who's going to take the last shot? Is it going to be Cam Spencer? I don't know who else it would be, frankly. I don't think it's realistic to expect. The thing about this part of the year that's so great is that everyone thinks that all these great things that you expect to happen will. Caleb McConnell is going to take that NCAA tournament offense that he always has every year and bring it to the regular season. Paul Mulcahy is going to take that 4-game stretch in February and do that every night. These things aren't realistic. It's not fair to put those expectations on those players, but I do think it's fair to, will Caleb McConnell make a step forward offensively? Will Paul Mulcahy develop some consistency and take the reins with more minutes and a bigger leadership role? If you get those contributions, those jumps, I think Rutgers could be an upper half Big Ten team, and I think they'll be on the bubble entering February. That's my expectation. I think Pikiell has brought the program to that point, but a lot of this is wait and see. We'll know more once we get to December.
Yeah, I agree. And that stretch, with Miami, Florida, and then, they have the 2 Big Ten games with Indiana, Ohio State, and then, Seton Hall, Wake Forest. That's a really tough stretch. I think we'll learn a lot then. But, yeah, I agree with you. I'm curious, the offense, it's almost like I'm not going to say they're going to be better, but it's going to be interesting to see where there's not a true alpha like there was, with Gio and Ron taking the majority of the shots. If there's a little bit more balance now with shot taking, obviously Cliff needs to be a focal point. I totally agree. I'm super excited about Cam Spencer. I think he's going to be really, really good. Caleb has said he's worked out in the offseason. I think he hired a coach and, has really put a lot into the offensive end. But I think it's going to be different, right? It's not going to be – I think it's going to be less isolation. It's going to be more feeding through the post with Cliff. Maybe running things through. I think Spencer is interesting because he's not the kind of guy that can create off the dribble. They're going to have to set him up. They're going to have to get screens for him. And I think it's going to be a little bit of, even though I think conceptually the same. The offense, I think, is going to have to be different. And I think with Mulcahy, he was such a good off offense off screen, posting up, and they just looking at the stats. I think he was. I'm working on this. You'll like this, but it's like top 5%, I think, nationally, 95th percentile with post ups. At like the free throw line, he was like the best. But they only did it. The usage was like super low. So I feel like there's concepts that they could do, with Cliff, Mulcahy, Spencer, who knows about Caleb, that this offense in a way could maybe be more efficient than they even have been in the past.
Sure, I think so, and I think they're gonna have to, adapt to the personnel, right? They don't have a guy like Ron Harper who can, like you said, create off the dribble, make his own shot, and be this weapon in the backcourt that can kind of the offense can go through. I think they will have to go through Cliff. I think that's probably the right approach, right? If he is expanding his shooting range and becoming more of a versatile weapon, you go through him and have him run some, take some shots or whatever it may be. And I agree that Paul Mulcahy posting up was a very successful action they had, especially in that run, that 4-game run that we mentioned before. That was a big part of it. And the worry I have, maybe not worry, but the question I have is the depth. Do they have enough depth behind a lot of young players who they seem to be high on? Will they be able to play right away? Is a question. That's one of my questions coming in. But I think their top half is strong enough to, barring any injuries or any regression that we don't foresee. I really think they could be again a solid Big Ten team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they could certainly be top half. It's funny because most people are concerned about the offense. I'm actually concerned about the defense because I worry. I mean, I think for Cliff, that's his next step, right? Can you be a dominant rim defender? And then obviously you have Caleb back, but with Mulcahy and Spencer on the floor at the same time, certain matchups that might be a problem with quickness. The other team's guards, and then also, I love Reber. I know people love him, and I'm not trying to disparage him defensively, but there's just certain matchups that aren't good for him in the Big Ten. And I think it's going to be interesting how Peichel juggles the rotation, especially on the defensive end against certain matchups.
Right. How much will Jalen Miller? I saw Jerry Carino mention that he had a scope on his knee. I don't think it's going to be a long-term thing, but when he comes back, how often are they going to be switching him on to play defense? Because he's obviously him and Spencer are kind of yin and yang in that Spencer's a great offensive player, not so great defensively, whereas Miller's a great defensive player, not so great offensively. How much are they going to have to switch? I know they do that a lot at the end of games last year. How much are they going to have to do that, in the rhythm of a game? I think I agree with you that Cliff, they're going to need him to make a jump, be a great rim protector. I think he's obviously shown the athleticism to do that. I think it's a matter of, learning where to be and things of that nature. And I think he showed some growth in that towards the end of last year. So they're going to need that jump. And if you have a guy like that who can protect the rim, I think that affords you some liberty defensively. And you're going to have to depend on Caleb McConnell to play as well as he did last year, which I don't know if that's fair because he played at a ridiculous level for a really long time. It was very impressive. But if he can match that, he's kind of a cheat code in a way that really, sweeps away some of the issues you have when you have a guy that can guard the other team's best player, play good and help defense, things like that. So, but I agree with you. That's a fair point. I do think there are plenty of question marks that we have to see get answered on the defensive end, but I think Peichel has earned the benefit of the doubt on that end as well. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, so I want to ask you about that because that's actually where I was going. But with Caleb too, if he's going to focus more on offense, that's an adjustment too in terms of can he be as elite defensively if he has more responsibilities offensive. But that's exactly what I wanted to ask you is, do you find it that me personally, I feel like Peichel does not get the same benefit of the doubt that say, Schiano does in certain regards. Obviously, Schiano has his first tenure, but what Steve Peichel's done the last 3 years, I just feel like, at the last 2 off seasons, just with the transfer portal, the way he's gone about it, the way the seasons have ended, obviously, great success, but at the same time, as the farther you go in the season, the more disappointing the loss is to end it. Are you a little surprised maybe by that? That is it a like small vocal minority that kind of voices this online and through your dealings with emails and all that, or is it more I guess bigger than maybe I think in terms of people that like to doubt him kind of not at every move, but it just seems he should have earned more of the benefit of doubt at this point. That's my take. I don't know. What do you think?
I think people would say I'm a bit guilty myself of not giving them the benefit of the doubt. I think I was pretty fair. I think people would not agree with me, but look, I think when you're able to do what they did last February and literally come back from the dead, I don't think anybody realistically could have thought that they would have done what they did in February to get. I mean, they had to make college basketball history by beating those 4 ranked teams in February to barely make the tournament as a bubble team. Like they did something unprecedented, right? So I think when you do that, you earn some benefit of the doubt. I do think some of the criticism is fair. I think we're somewhere in the middle here with some. There is a very vocal minority who anything that happens just crushes Pikel for whatever reason. They have some agenda. Those people exist. I do think that look, they made the tournament 2 years in a row, which at Rutgers is unbelievable. If you told anybody that would happen 5 years ago, they would think you're clinically insane. He deserves plenty of credit for that. He's not making the tournament, as a
should have been 3, Brian. Should have been 3.
well. I have a take on that, frankly. If you want to,
Yeah.
I don't accept that because so 2020 didn't go in, right? There was no tournament, but not even the logistic argument here. If they have that tournament, right, that's one less free year for Geo Baker and Ron Harper, right? They each got a free year of eligibility because of the pandemic. That's right? I'm not.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So,
well, actually, wait. No, they didn't, because Akwazi Yeboah did not get an extra year. It was because of 21, the COVID year when they played without fans. That's why they got the extra year.
Right. Well, in any yes, thank you for correcting that. But in any event, like Geo Baker wouldn't be back last year if they didn't have the pandemic tournament. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Well, that's true. Yes.
Maybe Ron Harper isn't back. Maybe he has a great 2020 tournament, 2021 season, and gets at least from the NBA a year early. Maybe they don't get a bunch of the butterfly effect of the tournament not happening. I think is too great for us to, or anybody really, to say they would have made it 3 years in a row. If not, because you don't know if they would have made it last year or the year after that, frankly, if because of the butterfly effect. But they have made it 2 years in a row. We know that for sure. That's indisputable. But it's not like they're making it as like a 5 seed, 6 seed. They're getting in by the seat of their pants as one of the last 4 teams in. Like they're barely making it. So I can understand why people are skeptical to automatically assume everything will be fixed. But I do think he has earned more benefit of the doubt that he is given by a lot of people. I think that's where I will agree with you.
All right. Well, that was a good take.
It's not an original. I won't say who told it, who mentioned it to me. I don't know if they want, but it was mentioned to me a few months ago, and it's been in my mind since. I just can't, because I was tolerant of the 3-year thing for a while, but once I heard that, I was like, yeah, it makes sense. I can't go along with it after hearing that. So.
Yeah, well, what kills me is I think that the 20 team was their best team, and not having a chance to go to the tournament. And I've had Gio and Ron on the podcast, and they both said it was their best team. And Gio talked about how he felt going into that tournament, like the postseason, they felt like they could truly beat anyone. And it was, I think that team gelled better than any of the 3 teams that, the last 3 years, although all successful. So that one is just an all-time what if for me in terms of not having the chance to go to the postseason.
I totally agree. I think that team could have won the Big Ten tournament. I think that team could have made, a Sweet 16. At least the way they were playing that last week against Maryland and Purdue, I think they could have beat almost anyone in the country. So, but again, it's a what if. It's you don't know. Maybe they go into the Big Ten tournament and just completely flop against Michigan. You don't know what would happen. Maybe they're riding so high off that Purdue. We've seen this so many times. Teams get a huge win, and then the next time out they come out flat. Right? You don't ever know. But I totally agree. It's a huge what if. And if they play the way they played at Mackey and against Maryland, they could have gone, made Rutgers history. Absolutely.
Last question for you, Olympic sports. What team are you looking at this fall in terms of being able to, make a real run in the NCAA tournament?
Women's soccer, I think, is the easy take here. I think they have a chance to, the way they've been playing, they have a chance to win the Big Ten tournament, make it to a national final. Finally, once you get to that tier of where they are, where they've consistently been for the last 3 years, really anything can happen. I think they have enough talent, enough offensive talent, and veteran experience and things of that nature, and a proven coach that they can. I think it's fair to assume, or not assume maybe, but fair to say that they could make a national final. I think men's soccer, tough loss today, really would have been a huge win if they were able to beat Maryland. But they've had a good stretch so far. I think if they manage to sneak themselves into the NCAA tournament, they could surprise some people. I've liked what I've seen from them from the limited times I've seen them. So yeah, those two are the teams I have my eye on. Is there anybody that I'm missing, you think, or Or
No, I think field hockey is, having a decent year, and they're the Big Ten is so good at field hockey. But yeah, I mean, women's soccer, I just think that starting lineup is there's no weaknesses whatsoever. I think it's the best program at Rutgers, culture wise. I love Mike O'Neill as a coach, and I think that I think their balance offensively, you think about it, they replaced 3 All-Americans, and they haven't missed a beat at all. And the Big Ten's been a little weird this year. Wisconsin's 5-0, but if you look at their schedule, they haven't really played anyone. Rutgers had a much tougher first half, so they might not even. I could see them not winning the Big Ten, but going really, really far in the NCAA tournament.
sure, that would be just kind of the reverse of last year, right? They go perfect in the Big Ten. I mean, they made the Final Four, to be fair, but yeah, it would be. I could totally see that. Yeah, it would not shock me at all.
Brian Fonseca, NJ Advanced Media beat reporter for Rutgers Athletics. Always a pleasure to talk to you. We go way back, and really appreciate all your time and for being here tonight.
Always a pleasure, and thanks for having me on. Thanks for letting me spill that take, and I can't wait to see what people are going to say about it.
Yeah, check your inbox soon.
Yeah.